Thank you, Jake. I'm sure you will stay busy as that atmospheric river just rolled through. So thank you once again, Jake. Terry, as always, thank you and Lawyer's Title for everything that y'all do. And I think without further ado, we're going to get right into it here. So, okay. See, it's getting exciting. Dana Corey, would you please come up and join me here? Dana is a business coach and strategist, and she typically works and specializes in the entrepreneurial space. So, Dana, I'm just going to hand it right over to you. Thank you so much for everything you do, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you all see me? Is this in the right place? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. It is kind of weird to have a light shining in your face and not be able to see everybody, but hi out there and hi out there. It's on, right? Okay. So raise your hand if you've ever grabbed your morning cup of coffee, sat down at your desk, looked at your calendar, and thought to yourself, what the heck have I gotten myself into? Anybody? Yeah. Raise your hand if you've spent so much time working that you've missed dinner with your family, time to hang out with your friends, and time for yourself. Thank you. Can you imagine what your life would be like if you actually had time? Like, what would be possible if you had all the time you needed to do the things you really wanted to do? It's pretty much unheard of, huh? I'm Dana Corey. As he said, I'm a business coach and business strategist. I spent the last 20 years working with established entrepreneurs to help them get from being inundated and overwhelmed to having a business that supports the life they want and becoming a freedom-led CEO. Honestly, what that all means is I help people to stop sacrificing all their life energy to their job and to their business so that they have some left over, so they have the life energy to actually live a life. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me here. And thank you so much for taking the time. Unlike a lot of speakers, I don't use slides. I have my little music stand with my notes. Okay, so you're gonna see me flip pages because that's what works for me. So by the time I'm done, I'm gonna simply some action things that you can do right away to create time. So each of us has the same 24 hours in the day. So when I say things like, let's create time, right? Sometimes people think I'm talking about magic. But here's the thing, you may not know me, but I'm really pragmatic. Okay, I have a little dose of woo sprinkled in because I have lived in Oregon for 26 years. But I don't generally do magic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not my standard operating procedure. So what am I talking about when I say let's create some time? Well, first, we're going to talk about time as a concept, okay? So, and we're also going to talk about the lens through which we look at time. Yeah, I have to lick my fingers. I know that's gross, right? Okay. So who here has heard it said that time is just a construct? You ever heard that? Yeah. Sounds good, right? Except that it's really hard to believe that you can change your idea of time when you don't have any, right? You can't wave a magic wand and make time, but each of us has actually experienced time as a construct. We've experienced time as malleable. So we've all had those times when time seems to be moving, crawling along, because either we hate what we're doing or like there's something really fun that's gonna happen, but it isn't here yet. And so we sit there and we're like, right? So it's crawling along. And on the other hand, we've experienced time as really fast when we're really excited about something, we're really loving what we're doing, or we're in the flow. So we've all had that experience. The biggest problem that Americans have with time, and let me just preface this by saying, everybody from any country has their own issues with time. But I'm going to talk about Americans because we all live in the US. So the way we relate to time is how we relate to time, but don't think that this is how everybody relates to time. So the biggest issue that we have is this idea that not only can we do it, but if we have to do it all. Like, we believe that, and that's bullshit. We simply can't do it all. You know, it's the same ridiculous expectation that women have been fed for years and years and years. And I know mostly you are guys, but you have your own version of this too, right? So we're supposed to be able to have a job or run a business, take care of the kids, be a good wife, take care of the house, look sexy, work out. Like, no, that's not real. It's imaginary. It makes us all feel bad. So we know that it's ridiculous, but we still buy into it. So simply the fact of being aware and understanding that time actually can stretch and contract gives us the ability to make time work for us. Okay? So the first secret to having enough time so that you can have a life you actually love to live is in the boundaries that you create. This is a boundary conversation. So you have to take a serious look at the things that are important to you. Ask yourself, if you could wave a magic wand, like I'm feeling very magical. Woo! Okay, if you could wave a magic wand, how would you spend your time? How would you spend your time at work? What about work lights you up? What do you hate about work? How would you spend your time with your loved ones? And who specifically are those loved ones? How would you spend time caring for yourself? What fills your cup? So you need to have an idea of what this life that you say you want, what that looks like. It's like knowing the address when you go out to drive somewhere. If you don't have an address, you're not going to get where you're going. You have to have an idea of what you actually want your life to look like. Having time for all the things you want requires knowing what you want and choosing them over others. That's boundaries. So most people think that when we talk about boundaries that it's some really simple conversation because it's about saying no, right? Like, think, oh, well, that's what it is, except it's way more than that. Creating boundaries is also about what you say yes to, right? It's about defining the edges. How do you relate to your life? How do you relate to the people in your life? How do you relate to the demands of your life? What expectations do you have? What expectations of you do others have? Your conditioning, and like more. But the cool thing about all these boundaries is that every time you recognize one and you create it and then you uphold it, the more often you do that, you're creating a container inside which the life you want can show up. And the primary medium of boundaries is time, okay? So you have the power to create as much time as you want relative to the commitment, to your commitment to delineating boundaries. So here's the thing. If you take not one other thing away from what I'm saying, I really want you to take this sentence away. If you write this down, it will change your life. You have the power to create as much time as you want relative to your commitment to delineate boundaries. If you think of the world of boundaries as an onion, you simply start with the places that are the most accessible, okay? So what does that look like? Over time, what happens? You delineate a first level of something like the easy stuff. And you live in that for a while, and all of a sudden you're like, ooh, wait, I need a boundary there. That's like the one under that first layer, right? And then other things show up that you had no idea that you even needed boundaries there. But once you've started creating them, they show up in the space. Does that make sense? Cool. And you'll start seeing where you have missing boundaries, where you have soft boundaries, where you need boundaries, but you don't have any. And then you start working on painting them, building them, keeping them straight, digging them deep, until those boundaries are so much a part of your life that they actually disappear. They become invisible because you're so clear. So here's something that you can do today about the boundaries. If you can just identify one place where you know that you need to fortify a boundary that you have, I'm not even saying create a new one, just fortify a boundary that you have that has gotten a little porous. If you can think of one, everybody have one? Just think of one. So what are some things that you could do to make it stronger? What can you do to have the people whom the boundary impacts? So that's the thing about boundaries. When you draw boundaries, almost all the time, somebody else is impacted. So what can you do to strengthen that boundary, and what can you do to help the people who are impacted understand that boundary in such a way that they will honor it? You might need to retrain them. Retraining them takes a little time, but it works. As long as you have compassion for that. People hate change, right? People hate change. So if you're going to retrain people around your boundaries, you have to know that it's going to be upsetting to them. And so you just have to find ways to do it. And if you are resolute in your commitment to holding the boundaries, then it becomes easier to retrain them. Okay, so did that part make sense? That's the intangible woo part of time. All right, we have to have some of that in whenever we talk about anything if we live on the West Coast. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the more tangible pieces of time and of creating time. Are you ready? So most people work really hard. We do all the things. We fall into bed exhausted only to get up and do it again the next day. It's like living on a hamster wheel. Many of us have been on the hamster wheel for so long, we've forgotten where the latch is to let us out. Like we don't know how to step off. And to be fair, many of us have tried. So some of us have taken courses on time management. Some of us have bought books and then found we haven't had time to read them. Or if you do have time to read them, you don't have time to implement the things they suggest. Or even what's really worse, if you have time to read it and you implement them and find out that their suggestions don't work for the way that your brain works. And that's one of the things that's really hard for people. There actually is no one size fits all answer. This is why when I work with my clients, I only work with people one-on-one, because our brains all work differently from each other. So what I do is I'm gonna give you a starting place, but if you really want to impact the way that you relate to time and being able to have enough time to do the things that you want to do, you have to be willing to experiment and to understand that it's just a starting place. and that it's going to take a little bit of tweaking and working and thinking it through and watching yourself live it to finally come up with like a suite of time management principles that are going to work for you. Okay. So I'm not one of these people that's like, oh yeah, here's the answer. Well, no, here's the beginning of the answer. Okay. Okay. So first we're going to tackle creating some spaciousness in your daily calendar. So I always tell people, start with downloading an empty week's calendar from the internet. Okay, you know, it's blank and it says Monday through Sunday. And sometimes there's time, but mostly it's just these columns, right? So start with that. You're going to hate me when I say the next thing because you're all real estate people. I work with real estate agents and brokers quite frequently, and this is the part they really hate, which is your work and your business suffers because you don't take a full 24 hours off from work. Right? So your work and your business will suffer. Okay. No, that's okay. Okay, should I take a break or should I keep talking? Okay, I'm going to keep talking. Okay, so you start with an empty calendar. And as I said, you're going to take a day off. Now, it is a badge of honor in your industry to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But I'm telling you, it is making you less productive because our brains need a break. So delineate one day off. Okay, start there. I make my clients actually take 2 days off a week and then go on vacation. Like, I'm a stickler about this. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take each day, you're going to divide the morning into 2 90-minute periods, like sections. You're going to give yourself a place to eat. And then you're going to divide the afternoon in 3 90-minute sections. Okay? Remember, this is just the beginning of a template. Then you're going to make a list of your work categories. What does that even mean? So work categories. So there's the work you do with your client. So if you're walking them around properties, or you're sending them taking them on tours, or you are having them sign the papers, like you're actually working with the client. So that's client work. There's admin work. There might be work that you don't do with the clients, like you go to inspections. There's all these categories: bookkeeping, right? Financial work, marketing. There's work categories. You're going to make a list of your work categories, and you're going to look at your paper that now has these 5 times 6 is 30, right? Is that right, math? Yeah, okay. So we've got 30 sections in your calendar, because we're not counting that 7th day because you may not work on that day. So the first thing you do is you look at your personal priorities. Some of us have to work out in the morning to be human, right? Some of us take our kids to school. Some of us have to pick up our kids from school. We all have personal priorities. Those actually go into your calendar first. And then you take your work categories and you plug them into the different blocks of time that are on your calendar. Now, some work priorities need more than one block. So for me, for instance, as a coach, I work with my clients on Monday afternoons, Tuesday and Wednesday mornings from 9 to 1. Okay, I do marketing, things that are considered marketing, on Monday mornings. I do meetings and sales calls on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. I have a money date with myself on Fridays. Yeah, that's advanced time. money dates. We can talk about that later. Right? So there's admin. There's admin to do. I actually take Fridays off. The only thing I do on Fridays is a money date. Other than that, I'm off. But so you would do that, right? So there's different things require different amounts of time. You only need one money date, but like you might need 3 marketing blocks. Okay, when you're doing this, I know this sounds ridiculous, but it really works if you just start with it as a blank template, as an idea. The things to keep thinking of are what I call invisible time, okay? So invisible time is time to eat. Y'all, you're human, you have to eat. So make sure you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Make sure you're not always in your car when you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, really, I know it sounds really silly, but you are getting in the way of your own productivity by doing these things. You think you're being more productive, but you're actually not. So build an invisible time. Oh, here's one other invisible time. Travel. So if you have a meeting to go to, or like this, right? This event, there was time to get here and there'll be time to go home. So you want to make sure that you're always building in your travel time. And you want to make sure that you're not scheduling every minute of the day, because I will tell you that you will feel handcuffed and you will rebel, and everything, you'll not do any of it. In fact, so I have a client who we just recently did this part. He's high anxiety, ADHD, running a tech company, and he has a full-time job, okay? So the guy is like pressed to the wall, and he's always anxious that he's not getting enough done. So we did this for him. And so the first thing happens is we created an idea of what we thought his week should look like. And then his job was to go out and live the week. And this is what happens. You watch yourself do it. There are going to be things that you do with no problem. And there are going to be things, that you don't do. That's fine. But when you don't do what you said you were going to do, you want to ask yourself, what got in the way? Why didn't I do that? What got in the way? And just make a note of that. Okay. So we did this for him, and he was getting up at 5 o'clock to go into the office. He has a sales job for people on the East Coast. So he goes to the work at 5. He does calls for 3 hours. He leaves the office. He goes home and he works out. And all of that was great. And then he didn't have lunch. So that was the first clue. And then the first block of every afternoon, his wife is pregnant. The first block of every afternoon is him asking himself, what can I do to make Jen's life easier today? That's his job for that block. And then he works on his startup for 2 sessions in the afternoon. So he did almost all of this really well. But what he saw was the stuff in the morning was beautiful. Like, it calmed down his anxiety all day, even though in the afternoon he was less likely to finish, like, do what it said. So we made some tweaks. So it's not about doing it and throwing the thing out in the baby out with the bathwater. And you come back and you're like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. So you know what didn't work? He didn't have any distraction time. So I'm going to tell you to build distraction time into your calendar. What's distraction time? When you can sit down and scroll through your phone without a care in the world. If you don't build that into your schedule, you'll do it anyway. You'll mess it all up, and then you'll feel guilty and you'll beat yourself up with an imaginary whip, and there goes the whole benefit right out the window. So build in distraction time. If you need to see your email, 3 times a day, then make sure that you're building 3 20-minute sessions into your day where all you do is check your email. Is this making sense? Okay, great. One of the time blocks that I think about is CEO time. So how many of you in here own your own business? I can't tell from online, but you own your own business. Okay, So when you own your own business, once you start having employees, whether you like it or not, you're a CEO. And one of the things about being a CEO is you actually have to have regular meetings with your team. I always say you need to, if you're not meeting with your team twice a week at least, then you need to put that in. But if you meet with your team every day for 15 minutes, that's awesome. Like, it actually is great. Builds culture, it builds team, it's awesome. But you have to put that into your schedule. Okay, so there's one kind of time that we didn't talk about. Are you ready? So most of us have a list of running things or projects that we're going to do someday. Do you all know what I'm talking about? Right? The someday list. So the someday list is going to be a never list if you don't actually create time to do it. So here's how you create time to do it. You plan in 2-week segments. So every Sunday night when you sit down to look at what your week is going to look like, and if you're not doing that, that's a hint. Okay, so you're looking at what your week's looking at. You're not just looking at this week, you're looking at next week too. And what you're going to do in the next week is do this. You're going to find a 90-minute section of time that is empty and that you can do something called deep work. So deep work, in my definition, is all those projects on that someday list. But you can only do them one at a time. So you have to prioritize the someday list into those things that actually have to get done right away and those things that can wait a year, right? Like, really, what's important? Deep work sessions work like this. You put them in your calendar. The very first deep work session you ever have is you going through that particular project that you've decided is the project you're working on right now. And you make a list of all of the things that need to happen to get you from here, A, to there, Z, A to Z. Just dump them out. And once they're dumped out, then put them in what I call the prerequisite order, not the priority order, the prerequisite order. What has to happen first to let number 2 happen, then to let C happen, right, in that order. Here's what happens during deep work. Turn off all notifications, turn your phone off. Nothing is allowed to disturb deep work unless somebody is bleeding. Like nothing. That's how important it is, because otherwise you're never working on your business, you're just working in your business. You start with A and you just start working on A. You set the timer for 90 minutes and you start working on A, and when A is done, then you work on B, and when the timer goes off, you finish your sentence, you close your computer, and you leave until the next time deep work comes around in your calendar. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I hope this is useful. Okay, I did that, I said that. Okay, so when I was talking to Nicole about what I should talk about, and she said time, and I was like, well, do you want to talk about time like scheduling? How do you want to talk about time with planning? And she was like, could you do it all? And you know, we can never do it all, but I'm going to just touch on this one thing, because it's that time of year where we're talking strategic planning, okay? So many of us are thinking about, okay, so what's 2022 going to look like, and what are we going to do? Yes. Sorry, nobody has jumper cable. Okay. What was I saying? Oh yeah, 2022, strategic planning for 2022. So I'm going to tell you a few things about planning. Do you want to know about planning? Like for the new year? Okay, cool. So mostly strategic planning, when we think about it, is about goals. So I want to tell you something about goals. Goals, whatever anybody's ever told you about goals, here's the point of goals. Goals are designed to be winnable so that you can take the energy from accomplishing them, and that will propel you forward to do the next thing. How many of you have had a grocery list where you cross things off, or a to-do list where you cross things off, and every time you do it, you're like, oh, I did it, look, I did it, isn't that cool? That's like a tiny little bit of energy, right? Well, goals, that's the point of goals, is to give you energy, but on a much bigger basis. So you don't want to set goals that are so big that you're going to fail. If your brain knows that you've set yourself up to fail from the beginning, you're bound to fail. Like you failed before you started, right? So they can't be too big. But here's the thing, they also can't be too small. Your brain has to know you had to work to reach it. Because if you think that you've just sat around and ate bonbons and all of a sudden you reached your goal, when it happens, it won't feel like you accomplished anything. You won't get the energy and you'll beat yourself up for not having done anything. So you fail if it's too small and you reach it, and you fail if it's too big. So there's a sweet spot, okay? Y'all get that? Okay, here's another thing. Measure one thing. Pick one thing as the overarching thing that you're going to measure for the year. Now, no matter what you pick to measure, if it's the one thing you're measuring, there's going to be lots of little things in there that have to happen to make that happen. But don't make 50 goals. They stop being impactful. Measure one thing. Okay, so as I said, I've worked with, it's so weird to have that there. I've worked with a lot of real estate agents over the last 8 years. And there's this very common thing that we've figured out about making goals with real estate agents. And it probably is the same if you're a lender. It's really, really true about real estate. If you could pick a revenue goal. Like people pick a revenue goal. That seems like normal. But here's how it works better. Instead of picking a revenue goal, pick a number of transactions. You're like, well, why would I do that? Well, here's why. When you are thinking about transactions, this is not semantics. This is actually the way that your brain, I do a lot of work around how the brain works. So this is how your brain thinks about it. When you're talking about transactions, and then you split them into buy transactions and sell transactions, those are homes and they're people. So every transaction, every house you sell or buy, there's a person that is buying or selling that house, and there's that life, that person's life that you're impacting. If you measure the people instead of the dollars, I promise you it works better, because it's not just your head that's involved. It actually engages your heart. And I know I don't have time to talk to you about this, but we have brain cells in our heart. We also have brain cells here. So we have 3 brains. Humans have 3 brains. But it engages the brain cells in your heart. And it makes a huge difference when you finally get to reach your goal. And of course, when you're measuring transactions, there's a correlating revenue amount because you have an average transaction amount, right? Like, we're not getting away from the dollar. We're just not measuring dollars. Okay, so I'm going to sound like a kindergarten teacher for a second. But again, this is I've been doing this for a really long time, and I really do know what works. So this is going to sound really almost silly, but I'm promising do it. So pick a transaction number, divide it into buys and sells, and go and find one of those icons. So one of my clients chose, the black outline around a house, right? That's an icon. Another one of my clients actually chose people, like, the outlines of people, like there's women and there's men, and she works mostly with women. And so she put little girls. And you make a piece of paper. So you can use just a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And whatever it is that your transaction number is, and however many buys and sells, the top of the piece of paper is buy, the bottom of the piece of paper is sells. And you put that many icons. So let's say you're going to do a house. Okay. So those empty house, just black outlines of houses. Now, when you have somebody who makes an offer, you could write that person's name on the inside of that house in pencil. And then if they get the house, And it goes to pending. Maybe you can write a circle around it in pencil. And then when it closes, you can go over it with a black Sharpie. And then when you get paid, you can highlight it, and then you can write the amount that that sold for, and then the amount that your commission was for next to it. And you get the idea what this looks like? Doesn't it feel a little kindergarten-y? But here's the kicker. You want to put it right where you can see it every day from wherever it is that you sit the most. So if that's in your car, tape it up to the dashboard. But if that's your desk, tape it up on the wall on the other side of the computer. Every time you color that in, you're going to see it. You're going to stop seeing it, believe it or not. Your brain stops registering it, except every time you color it in. It stops registering it consciously, but unconsciously, you're seeing your progress every single day. Okay? Is there anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, there's one more thing. Sorry. So the one other thing that you want to make sure that you do is every time you close something or you color it in, you stop everything you're doing, and celebrate. Whatever that looks like for you, celebrate. Celebrate it with the people who did it with you. Just celebrate. Your brain needs celebration in order to feel like it's an accomplishment. Okay? So make sure you celebrate. Okay. So the third part of creating time, which is I'm just going to do really short. The next level of creating time is by adding more hands. You know what that means? That means hiring people. So this is really only valid for people who own their own businesses. And I wasn't really sure how many of you were going to be here, but I want to make sure that you understand that that's one of the things that you can do as a business owner to clear your plate a little bit is to hire other people. And here's the way to know who to hire. You take a piece of paper, you write a line down the middle vertically, so you have two columns. The first column is labeled the things only I can do. And when I say that, I really mean it. What is the things that only you can do in your business? Sometimes you're like, oh, there's nothing that only I can do. But there actually is. It's why you're a business owner. There's a zone, and you're not working for somebody else. There's a zone of genius that you have that you bring to your business that nobody else can bring. Usually it's about being the face of the business, okay? The other column is called things I do that somebody else could do. And you walk around with a silly piece of paper for a month. Why a month? Because there are things that you do that you only do once a month. There's also things that you do only once a quarter, once every 6 months, but really just do it for a month. And every time you change task, write the task in one column or the other. And then you're going to have a list of tasks on that page that other people could do that you do. Batch those into what I call like job descriptions or positions. Like there'll be admin, there might be some marketing, there might be bookkeeping, there might be, right? And batch them. And then you want to make a decision for yourself. What is the order in which, what's the priority to you in the order in which that you want to hire people? Is it that you want to get the things off your plate that you hate the most? Is that how you want to do it? Do you want to get the things off your plate that are the cheapest to hire for? Do you want to get things off your plate that are clearly you're doing them, but boy, are you bad at it, right? So you have to make a decision. And then the next step is to figure out how much money it costs to hire. Here's the piece that you always forget. How much does it cost you not to hire? People always leave that piece out. It's really important. You never need as much money as you think. We always think, oh my God, we need a salary for a year. You do not need a salary for a year. Somebody who takes a job, no matter what job it is, should either be directly impacting the bottom line, either bringing in more money or saving you money, or impacting your time, taking stuff off your plate so you have more time to make money. Make sense? And that should take 6 months for them to hit the black or that line. And after that, they should be slowly increasing. So you really only need money for 6 months, and you don't need the whole salary for 6 months because the line should look like this, not, did I make a good enough face? Okay, I think that's it. Blah, blah, blah. I haven't done this for like 2 years. It's so cool to be up in front of a room talking, in front of people. Okay, so when I was talking about the way our brains work differently and how the worst thing about the fact that as humans, we all interact and interpret the world from a different place is that we can't actually see how we do it. We see really well how other people do it and how they get in their own way. But we're in our way. We're there. We're like the fish in the bowl who can't see the water, right? No, you can't actually see how you're not doing things in the most effective way or in a way that creates more opportunity for you instead of cutting it off. So that's the kind of work that I do. That's why people hire me, because I see things that they don't see. And in the process, that question of what might be possible if, that becomes a lot bigger. Because if you can't see what's there for you and somebody else can, and you're willing to actually shift how you're doing things because somebody might know something about what you do better than you do, like magic, that's where I do magic. Remember we talked about magic? That's magic. It's magic. So that's what I do. Okay, so if you want to talk to me more about that, you can find me later. But does anybody have any questions? Like, I've been talking long enough. Yes. Anything. No, you work it into your whatever during the day from the moment you get up to the moment, okay, not the moment you go to sleep, because here's the thing, you need to have a life. You have people in your life that want to see you. So you can't just work till midnight, okay? So yes, in your regular day, whatever your regular day looks like, during a week's time, you're going to find a 90-minute block to start working on whatever this project is. And you're just going to tackle it step by step by step. Here's something really cool that happens in our brains. You know that someday list that we beat ourselves up with that we never get to, right? Like this project maybe that you've been sitting there forever. As soon as you start working on it, even if you don't get very far, but as soon as you start working on it, your brain's like, we're doing it. And it leaves you alone because it knows you're working on it. And so if you can do a deep work session every week ongoing, you will eat that project up, especially if you do deep work with no distractions and you commit to yourself that nothing is going to get in your way unless one of your children is bleeding. I'm a mom, can you tell? My kids are all grown, but yeah, thank you. Oh, the first question was, could it be any kind of project? Could it be a personal project? Could it be a work project? Could it be whatever? And then the second question is, do you fit that deep work session into your regular day or do it after hours? Oh, he also asked if it could be a startup. Like it could really be anything, right? So the guy, my client that I was talking about before, who has the sales job and does in the morning, he just got a patent for something that's a startup. And he's never done a startup before. And so he's working on a startup and he does a lot of deep work sessions during the week because that's his baby. So he has to get the work out of the way first thing in the morning. Anybody else have questions? Okay. Yeah. So she wants to know if you can't make a goal that's too small or too big, how can you define that? Which also is a way of saying realistic. Realistic. Like realistic's hard to imagine. But here's the thing. I always start with what did I do? So let's say you're doing transactions, right? So you look back on, we're in 2021, right? Yeah. Okay. Time. Okay. So you look at what you've done this year and you evaluate, okay, so it took me this to do it. And so this many transactions, this was my average transaction number. There were this many buys, this many sells. I'm just using this as an example because you guys are all in real estate. But it could be anything. And then you ask yourself, okay, did I kill myself to make this happen? If you killed yourself to make it happen the way it was, there's another way. How do I know? I'm working with a real estate agent right now who is so overwhelmed by the number of transactions that she's been doing, and we're just making time. Like, we're changing the whole way she does her business without messing it up. But don't do that many transactions. That's the first thing. Like, if you're killing yourself, don't do that many transactions. So pick a number that's more so you can have a life and be a person. Money is not everything, you guys. Like, really, I make a lot of money. But what's more important to me is that I get to stay home and hang out with my husband. I married my husband because I like him, right? If I don't get to see him, what's the point? So anyway, sorry, no moralizing over here. Okay, so, but then on the thing of how much. Okay, so you're going to take a stab in the dark. You know, here's the thing. That's such a funny question. Close your eyes. Ask yourself, is this too much? Your body will react. You will know. Don't fool yourself that your body doesn't know. It's all connected. Your gut will tell you, if nothing else. Your heart will tell you. So just ask yourself. And then when you're actually taking that plan and dividing it into like doable pieces, which personally I think you should, once you have a number, don't plan for more than 90 days at a time. Like, we really cannot handle 90 days, more than 90 days. We just had a pandemic. Who saw that coming? Right? Like, all the things on the bingo card that weren't there. So 90 days. And then at the end of the 90 days, or close to the end of the 90 days, you say, oh, am I on track? Does this make sense, the way that our industry goes up and down and what month it is and what's been happening? Am I on track? And then the second question is, do I still want to be on track? Is that the number that I'm still going for? And true yourself, nobody cares if you change your number. Okay, I saw you raise your hand. You take a stab at it. You put it on the calendar. Here's the thing. You have to be willing to be, I always say, you have to be willing to be a scientist. You have to be willing to experiment with your life and actually go out and go, okay, well, this is what I think. So now I'm going to go do it. And while you're doing it, it's as if you're also back there watching yourself do it. And if it doesn't work, then you go back to the drawing board. Like, when scientists experiment, it doesn't always work out. And then they have to go back and figure out, okay, well, what's another way to do it to get to where we want to go? So it's the willingness to not have instant gratification, which is a really hard thing to learn. But I promise you that if you guess, you're going to get at least one thing right. You will. Like, in the course of your week, you're going to be like, I got that. That worked. Okay, good. So keep that and build on that. Okay. Yeah. What do I think? Well, you're probably too far away to have seen my eyes roll. Got it. Okay, so that's a really interesting question. And I know she wants me to repeat it, but I'm not sure how to repeat it. So how would you, so he wanted to know, like, what if you had a really big goal? An example that he gave was, if you made a goal to do 10 transactions in a year, but you got 0. But if your real goal was to do 1,000 transactions in 10 years, you'd have to set it up differently. And how would you do that? So I've got kind of 2 answers for you. Okay. The first thing is that it's really, really hard for our brains to understand a 10-year period of time. So you can have that goal for 10 years. Like, I'm not saying don't have a 10-year goal, but then what I am saying is you have to reverse engineer it so that whatever it is that the goal is that first year, to build up to get to a place where you can do 1,000, whatever that's going to take, then have the goal for the year be that first step. Because your brain simply can't hold on to it. And what will happen is that it will feel so much like you're not getting anywhere that I'm not supposed to swear, right? So you're gonna mess yourself up in the back of your head without even knowing it. And you're gonna totally get in your own way. You have to win. You have to be able to win along the way, or you're not gonna have enough energy to get to 10 years. Does that make sense? I'm also gonna say this. There is an entire school of thought, and most of them are men, who are like, I can do anything. And you're welcome to live that way. But I promise you that the number of people who actually make that happen in the way that you're talking about is really few. This works better. So I always tell my clients, don't do things because you believe me. Like, you don't have to believe me. But do things because it's easier this way. Why would you choose to do things the hard way? Why would you make it hard for your brain? Make it easy. Okay. Did that help? Are you mad at me now? Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, no, let's not do that. So either you have a question or you don't. Yeah, if you don't win at all, you're going to get burnt out. Yep. Yeah, independent contractors, totally. Use independent contractors. Yep. A 100%. We all are. Yeah. Yeah, so here's the thing. You don't have to be an asshole to create a boundary. You just have to be clear. You don't have to be an asshole. You can be totally kind. Being kind doesn't mean capitulating. Do you know what I mean? Like, being kind doesn't mean not doing what you said you were going to do. So you can hold a boundary and be kind, and don't be an asshole. Like, that's how you not be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. Right? Don't be an asshole. Just be kind. Like, this is how it's going to be. This is, for me, this is how it's going to be from now on. Yeah, I'm no longer doing things like this right now. I'll let you know when I'm open again to doing these things. Exactly. This is about you. It's your boundary. It's not their boundary. It's your boundary. So own your boundary and be kind. And absolutely 100% don't be an asshole. Okay? Joking. No, not joking. Okay. I have no idea how much. Somebody cut me off, okay? Because I could do this forever. Anybody else have a question? Or are we done? I can't see. Oh, way back there. Sure. I'm Dana Corey, DANA COREY, and I'm a business strategist and a coach, and I work with entrepreneurs, business owners, to get them from being inundated and overwhelmed to having a life that that a business that works as a tool so that they can have the life that it supports the life that they want to have. No, I specialize in making sure that you have a life you love. So it includes all sorts of things. It includes time. We do a lot of time because most of my clients end up working about a third less hours a week than they used to. But we also do a lot of work around revenue because you need money coming in order to support you having a life. But then we do a lot of work around here so that you stop being like a business owner that thinks of themselves as self-employed and start being a business owner that's a badass CEO. Yeah, it's really fun. As I said, it's magic. Am I done? Good. Thank you.